Okay, so we're diving into some fascinating stuff today. This whole idea of self-parenting, especially for adults with ADD, really grabbed my attention.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it?
It is. It reminds me of something Anthony Storr wrote about how, being able to be alone is actually crucial for our brains to function well and for us to, like, reach our full potential.
Absolutely. It's like creating that space for ourselves to actually grow.
Right. And this concept of self-parenting kind of fits right in with that. It's about, like, intentionally nurturing ourselves, almost like a parent would a child.
That's the heart of it. It's about recognizing that we often need to consciously step into that caring, guiding role for ourselves, especially those of us with ADD who might feel constantly bombarded with, well, everything.
Yeah, that constant stream of input.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to kind of pull out the most useful wisdom and practical advice for you, the listener. How can we provide ourselves the kind of care and support a mindful parent offers a child? That's the question. It's so true. And I love how the source paints this picture of like many adults with ADD feeling like they're on autopilot,
Oh, yeah.
just reacting to whatever the day throws at them, not really um, paying attention to their deeper needs for a more, I don't know, centered and connected existence.
And that sense of time being scattered.
Oh, totally. It's like it's always slipping away.
Which makes it even more important to bring intention to how we care for ourselves. And the author uses this really striking analogy. They say, if we're honest about how well we parent ourselves, the results can be kind of alarming.
Oh, yeah.
Like even concerning if we were talking about an actual child.
Yeah.
And the fact that the author includes themselves in this self-assessment, it adds a real honesty to it.
It makes you think, for sure.
And it leads right into those foundational concepts of like self-understanding and self-acceptance. Those aren't just, feel-good ideas. They're presented as absolutely essential, like mirroring that responsibility a parent feels. Right. And with that, we have to remember that people with ADD, they have this inborn sensitivity. So their environment, like everything around them and inside them, it really shapes their emotions and thoughts.
Exactly. It's an ongoing influence, isn't it? And the main point the source makes is so clear. Our brains need the right conditions to develop new circuits, And our minds need new ways of relating to the world, to ourselves. You can't really have sanity in the middle of self-created chaos.
Okay, so let's break down those crucial environmental conditions, starting with, well, our physical space, the place where we live.
It's the backdrop to everything, isn't it?
It is, and the source emphasizes this need to make conscious choices about our living environment. And they bring up this concept of counterwill, that kind of resistance we can feel even towards ourselves.
Like that teenage rebellion.
Yeah. But directed inwards.
Yeah.
Like giving yourself that same autonomy you'd offer a teenager making their own choices.
And what's interesting is they reframe cleaning and organizing our space, not as this dreaded chore, but as a deliberate act of self-support. It's recognizing that, hey, a less chaotic environment can actually help us grow. And being aware of the consequences, like if we choose to live in clutter, understanding what that might do to our mental state down the line.
Exactly. And
Now,
they point out that for someone with ADD, their physical space can either, like, harmonize with their mind or completely throw it into disarray. Even if someone thinks they work fine in chaos, that sensitivity is still there.
always.
So
Yeah.
neglecting our physical space is kind of like neglecting ourselves.
It is. And for those feeling overwhelmed by like the thought of decluttering, that advice to set small, doable goals makes total sense, chipping away at it, especially if that all or nothing thinking that can pop up.
Oh, for sure. If I can't do it perfectly, why bother?
Right. And then there's that technique of setting a time limit for tasks instead of focusing on finishing everything. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah, it becomes about dedicating a set amount of time rather than this huge, overwhelming project.
And you actually get to see like how you use your time when you approach these tasks.
That's smart.
And I like how they emphasize learning to accept setbacks. It's not about becoming a, perfectly organized person overnight. It's about that effort over time having a positive effect on your mind, even if there are days when, things get messy again.
Yeah, it's about the process.
Yeah,
Okay, moving on. What about sleep hygiene? This is a big one, right?
it is. So many people struggle with it. And the source mentions that ADD adults tend to be like night owls. And the author makes this interesting observation based on watching ADD kids that struggling to go to bed might be linked to separation anxiety, like needing emotional reassurance.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And then there's the author's own experience, how tension in his marriage seemed to affect his sleep
Yeah, it highlights those emotional factors, definitely.
For sure. And then the source describes this, like how the quiet of night can amplify the urgent mind, leading to those late nights, trying to distract yourself until you're just exhausted.
Oh, I know that feeling. Avoiding being alone with your racing thoughts.
It's so common. And they connect this to what's called implicit memory. Unconscious memories from early experiences, like maybe feeling disconnected from caregivers as a baby.
Interesting.
So, seeking comfort, whether it's mental, like through reading, or physical, like kids holding on to themselves, could be a way to soothe that underlying distress, maybe without even realizing it. And of course, there's the simpler idea that, with fewer distractions at night, it can actually be easier for the ADD mind to focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. But as the source stresses, sleep is super important, especially for our brains to recover, for that system that controls our alertness and attention.
It's crucial.
And that Anthony Storr quote about dreaming being like scanning or reprogramming really drives that point home.
It does. And the source highlights how ADD adults often view their sleep problems as just another symptom, rather than recognizing the huge impact it has on their mood, their ability to focus, their emotional state.
Right. It's not just a side effect. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears to nutrition. The idea scenario they present is like a parent providing these nutritious, appealing meals in a relaxed setting.
Yeah, the perfect family dinner.
Right. But for many ADD adults, it's often very different. Meals are irregular, eaten quickly, without much thought.
It's that self-neglect again.
It is. And remember that heightened sensitivity we talked about. Well, it applies to our internal environment too, not just what's happening around us. If we want to support our brain chemistry, and we absolutely should, then giving our bodies good, consistent fuel is key.
It's like with those ADD kids who have really strong reactions to changes in their blood sugar.
Exactly. What we eat directly affects how our brains work.
So good nutrition isn't just about physical health. It's foundational for mental and emotional well-being too.
It's all connected.
Absolutely. And then there's physical exercise. The source puts it bluntly. Is your kid getting enough exercise?
Aha, love that.
It's a good question, right? I mean, we know exercise is good for us, but they specifically highlight how a lack of it can create this inner sluggishness, which impacts our alertness and attention.
Oh, for sure. And beyond the physical benefits, exercise releases those crucial neurochemicals that affect our mood, motivation, and focus. And over time, it can actually make those processes more efficient.
So they recommend daily vigorous exercise.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
And they emphasize stretching both before and after workouts to balance out those muscle contractions.
Makes sense.
But even for those who can't do cardio, stretching is super beneficial, especially for ADD adults. They often carry a lot of tension, leading to tight muscles.
It's like holding on to stress physically.
Exactly. Stretching can release that, both physically and mentally. They even suggest adding it to a morning or bedtime routine.
Great tip. Okay, what about our connection with nature?
That's a big one. The source says, depriving a child of nature deprives them of experiences and this powerfully harmonizing influence on their mind.
It's like we're wired for it.
It seems so. And they talk about how hyperactive kids often calm down after being outside, away from the city.
It's a reminder that as adults, we need that connection too.
We do. It's a fundamental need, even if we forget about it.
And that Marcel Proust quote about nature being the opposite of our inventions, offering space for the heart to expand, it's so beautiful.
It is. And then there's Andrea's story about that concentration exercise she learned from the native elder, focusing on a small patch of meadow for a whole hour.
Wow, a whole hour.
The details she noticed, the exhilaration she felt, it shows the power of being present in nature.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about extracurricular activities, or maybe overcurricular for some of us.
Yeah. The source uses the analogy of not overloading a kid with too many things.
Makes sense.
And they highlight how ADD adults can be prone to overcommitment, often tied to workaholism and difficulty saying no.
Oh yeah, packing the schedule.
But that leaves little room for focused thought, for reflection. And it can become a cycle, right? You get busy to avoid dealing with things, and then you're even busier.
Trap.
It is. So if we want a different relationship with ourselves, more balanced, then letting go of some commitments is crucial. Creating that space.
It's about breathing room.
Exactly. Okay, shifting gears again, what about recreation? The source makes a clear distinction between, like, passive entertainment, like watching TV, and true recreation.
So not just vegging out.
Right. They say recreation should nourish our minds or liberate our bodies, leaving us feeling refreshed.
Rejuvenated.
Yes. And while what that looks like will vary for everyone, the common thread for ADD adults seems to be neglecting to actually schedule time for it. It's seen as extra, not essential.
Like a luxury, not a need.
Exactly. And then there's creative expression. The source talks about this secret longing for artistic expression that many ADD adults have.
But often don't pursue.
Sadly, yeah. And they emphasize how important it is to tap into those creative instincts as a way to find meaning and purpose.
It's about expressing ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And they explore this whole ADD and creativity connection. While there's anecdotal evidence, they're skeptical about ADD inherently making people more creative, but they do acknowledge that creative thinking is common in the ADD mind, even outside traditional art forms, like that knack for problem solving, thinking outside the box.
It's a different way of seeing things.
It is. And I love the author's reflection on how their own ADD might have actually held back their creative development. It's such an honest take.
Relatable.
And then they propose that maybe ADD doesn't cause creativity, but they both stem from the shared trait of heightened sensitivity. So that sensitivity gives you all this raw material for creative expression.
You're taking in so much more.
And Colin's story, the bartender who loved filmmaking, really illustrates this. He goes into the film industry after his diagnosis, but then reflects on all that lost time. And the author's response, but first you had to catch up to yourself. It's so powerful.
It gives me chills.
It's about honoring those creative impulses, even if it means revisiting something from the past.
Giving ourselves permission. Okay, finally, we get to meditation and mindfulness. The source presents this as the third pillar of a balanced life, alongside physical and psychological well-being.
It's that spiritual work, not necessarily religious, but about cultivating mindful solitude.
Taking that time for yourself.
And they point out that these practices, they're not just for, spiritual seekers. They offer benefits for everyone and are especially valuable for managing ADD.
Calming the inner storm.
Exactly. And the source mentions this age-old wisdom that there are deeper aspects to reality that we kind of recognize when we feel disconnected from our true selves.
Like we're missing something.
Right. And they bring up a really interesting point about the limitations of a purely scientific approach. Like maybe it misses some essential knowledge about human experience.
Things that can't be measured in a lab.
Exactly. And the author even admits to having limited direct spiritual experience, but a strong sense of remembering these realities.
It's like a knowing.
Yes. And then they reference Mark Epstein and A.H. Almaz, highlighting how Western psychology and Eastern spiritual traditions might be exploring the same ground using different language.
Different paths up the same mountain.
And this connects beautifully with the fragmented experience of the ADD mind, that yearning for wholeness. It's a spiritual quest in itself.
I like that.
And the author's own journey with meditation, initially difficult but then rewarding, it's so relatable. Learning to observe that fretful and anxious mind without getting swept away by it.
That's the key, isn't it?
It is. And they bring up Buddhism and Nietzsche, describing Buddha as a profoundest physiologist, even a neurophysiologist. It's about how mindfulness meditation can directly influence those neurological patterns in ADD, strengthening our ability to observe objectively, to separate our reactions from what's happening around us.
Becoming the watcher.
Exactly. And while meditation is one way to do this, they also point out that other activities that cultivate mindful concentration, like gardening or martial arts, can be just as beneficial.
It's about being present.
And they encourage adding daily contemplative solitude to our lives, just bringing our attention to our own lives, our thoughts, our feelings.
Like an inner check-in.
Exactly. And they emphasize that concentration is a skill that needs practice. It's hard at first, especially for the ADD mind, but even a small amount of focused time each day is progress.
Building those mental muscles.
Absolutely. Now, here's the catch-22. The very nature of ADD can make it hard to create the conditions needed for growth. Inner chaos fuels outer chaos, and vice versa.
It's a cycle.
It is, and we naturally want a quick fix, right? Like medication or some expert advice. But as Andrew Woyles quoted, people often feel stuck in their habitual ruts, unable to change without some outside force.
It has to come from within.
Exactly. So the source advocates for compassionate self-acceptance and tolerance for setbacks, while also says whether you succeed or fail is less important than making the attempt.
It's about the effort.
It is.
Yeah.
And they end with this powerful call to action. No better moment than the present, along with that great quote about taking charge and facing challenges head on.
So inspiring.
So, in a nutshell, this deep dive has been all about the importance of actively nurturing ourselves, like a caring parent would, especially for those of us with ADD.
And we've explored these 9 really practical areas. Our physical environment, sleep, nutrition, exercise, connecting with nature, managing our commitments, true recreation, creative expression, and meditation and mindfulness. These are tangible things you can actually do to support your well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you reflect on this, think about what resonates most strongly with you, or maybe what feels most challenging. What's one small, doable step you could take? Remember, real change comes from consistent effort and a whole lot of kindness towards yourself along the way.
Great advice.
Thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time.